Alright, so welcome back, and this time I got an interesting one for you guys. So you're probably thinking it looks pretty normal right now, but check this out. That's right, a clip just popped out the back right there. I can bet you haven't seen another knife like this one, and we're going to be breaking it down in just a bit. But just to take care of introductions right now, this right here is a Joe Caswell EDX. If Caswell is a name that sounds familiar to you, this is the same guy making those morphing karambits you've been seeing around. Interesting guy, he does some crazy stuff, kind of like the Hawk brothers, or actually I don't think they're brothers. Anyways, never mind. The only problem is, it doesn't seem like this guy right here, Caswell, he doesn't seem like he makes too many customs. This is the only one I've handled, and it took some searching to find it. So this review right here is just going to be about the knife here. I can't really talk about the maker too much just based off one knife. But anyways, back to the EDX. This thing right here, it drives my inner knife nerd insane. Let me just try and explain the lock mechanism on this one. It's the main selling point here, and I think it's brilliant. The clip you see back here is actually part of the lock bar. That runs the entire length of the blade, of the handle, and attaches to this back pivot right here. It almost works kind of like a back lock slash frame lock hybrid. There's a lock face on the blade right here. Actually, you can kind of see it right there. Yeah, that's better angle. And the lock bar comes down like a back lock to engage with it. So I don't know if I can really get the point across very well right now, but I drew some stuff to kind of help you guys out. Give me 1 second. This is what it looks like when it's closed. You see a blade right here, how it rests, and this is just kind of what it looks like when it's closed. So this, compared to that, there's a spring right here, and that's just kind of keeping the lock bar pushed down right here. Also, the end of the spring, there's a little hump right here. That engages with an internal stop pin that's mounted in the blade. It's only jutting out on this side. And you can kind of see that spring right there. Very end of it, that little hump. Kind of see it moving back and forth. That's it engaging with that little stop pin right there that I can't really show. So that's giving you about maybe 75% of your detent. The other part of it is just given by just a lock bar being pushed down. So we have it open, it'll look something like this. So you have the lock face over here, this is where it engages. The spring right now is extended. And you have this tab right here that's attached to a lock bar, which is this tab right here. If you were to take that out, it would look something like this. So you have the lock face over here. You have a little hole right here where it attaches to the end of the spring. I can actually show that right now. I see it about right there. But anyways, this tab right here, it's kind of like a backwards mounted clip that's just attached to a lock bar. So the end of it's right here. You push it up just like this arrow suggests. And then it brings this entire thing up. It pivots on the back right here. This brings the entire thing up and brings it off the lock face. Then you can close it. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. If you want my take on it, I want to say that this lock is a lot more than just a gimmick. I think it takes some of the best part of some more normal locks out there and kind of mixes them together. It's sure as hell weird, but it works and it works well. In terms of strength, I think it's somewhere in between a frame lock and a back lock. Now don't get me wrong, I know this talk about lock strength is mostly going to be useless. You're never really going to fail any well-made lock in normal use. But with the way he did this one, I think it's worth talking about. I'm not an engineer, not by a long shot, so take this with a grain of salt. I also didn't come here to do math, so I haven't done any calculations or anything like that. Don't expect that on this channel. But I do know that frame locks do slip if you put enough force on the spine. That's because it's kind of angled right here, and then when you push it, it wants to pop back out. In terms of geometry, this one here seems like it's less likely to slip. The force from the blade being pushed down is directly transferred to a lock face right here that goes into a lock bar and ends in that pivot right there, which is attached directly to a frame. It also feels like there are fewer weak points than with a frame lock. Like, let's see. Yeah, like this one right here. You have a relief cut right here. Frames cut out over here. It doesn't have any of that right there. So if you were to fail your test, the well done frame lock, it would probably fail at that relief cut right there. No relief cut on this one, so yeah, so no relief cut on this one. There's also no cut on the backside to make the lock bar. You're not touching any of the moving parts when you have this thing open. So you don't have to worry about twisting it in hand and accidentally releasing the lock or anything like that. That actually has happened to me before. On the other end, when you compare it to a back lock, it's not nearly going to be as strong. But you basically need a sheer metal to fail a well done back lock. But what a back lock doesn't have though is convenience. If it's a mid back lock, you have to press right here and then maybe like flick the blade down and then kind of close it the rest of the way. You have to move your hand around. If it's in the back, it's usually a two-handed affair. You have to push it back over here and then kind of bring it back with your other hand. So this one right here, I just push this tab up to disengage it. And I use my finger on that thumb stud right there. And just pull it right back. Also, the other thing you'll notice is that in no part of this process is my hand in the path of the blade when it's closing. I can actually do this fairly fast too. Also, when you go to close it, this tab right here, there's a little ledge right here. That's where your thumb to rest on when you close it. That way, you can't even get your thumb in here when the blade is closing. So, very well thought out and very well implemented here. In terms of function, it's also doing all the things that I think a lock should be doing. Getting zero play from this one. None at all when it's locked. This lock right here handles the up and down play, and the other less obvious thing about this one is actually the lockdown pivot. It's almost a side note when you compare it to a lock, but I think it's brilliant as well. It even came with a thing to explain it. I have it on my phone right now. So I'm going to zoom in and slowly scroll up. You guys can pause it if you want to. Alright, I think that came clear. So you can kind of think of the lockdown pivot as kind of like an adjustable bushing pivot. It gives you the strength and the structure that a bushing gives you, while still letting you adjust your pivot tension. The other thing is, like with a normal bushing, you fully tighten the front screw right here. So you don't have to worry about it coming loose as much. It also fixes the main issue that a bushing pivot has, which is the adjustability. Now, if you take a look at the clip right here, you can kind of see that it's a pretty thick clip. It's part of a pretty big lock bar right here. There's no real spring to it. You'll think it probably can't bend, and you're technically right on that. But the thing is, this one doesn't really need to. With the way it's set up, it gets its tension from the same spring that's keeping it pushed down this way. So the entire thing actually moves. Retention on this one's actually pretty decent. It gets in and out of pocket fairly easily, and I will say though, the clip being positioned on the spine right here, it is a bit awkward. It's not too bad, but it does take some getting used to. It's not like a Graham tail clip. It's not even close to being deep carry like the Graham, so there's actually going to be a lot of knife sticking out of your pocket when you have this one in there. So that's something you're really going to need to keep in mind. The other thing is, this thing is going to be tip down only. It's honestly not really much of an issue for me, but a lot of people out there like to say that tip up is the only real way to go. I think they're mostly right, but I've never really had an issue with tip down. It just kind of depends on the knife. Like if you look at this one right here, look at the blade shape right here. This thing just kind of curves down right here, is rounded on the top, and the tip is all the way buried in there. So that tip is never going to snag you. Also, the detent on these, it's more than strong enough to keep it safe. Like I said, it has like a double detent thing going on. You have this lock bar pushing down. You have that little hump engaging with the... I don't know if I can show it again. Yeah, you have that little hump engaging with the internal stop pin. So, I don't see this ever coming open in your pocket. The other thing is, it wants to snap back closed like a back lock. Take a look at this. Have it about over here. And let go. It comes right back. So this thing just wants to stay closed. I can't see this thing ever coming open in your pocket. After telling you all this, it's probably not going to surprise you when I say that this thing handles like no other. All this weirdness going on inside, it affects the action too. First up, you have these huge thumb studs right here, and they double as both the open and closed stop pins. They engage right here when it's open. They're resting against the frame right here when it's closed. So you get a hold of these things, and it's easy too, since they're basically the size of dinner plates. And you push it out, and after a point right here, it just wants to come open. It almost feels like it's half assisted or something like that, since the lock bar in the back just takes over after a certain point and just pushes the blade out and comes down. The other weird thing is that about right over here, the knife feels like it has a very light half stop, like something you might find on a traditional. You're only really going to feel it when you open it slowly, like when you try to thumb it open, or sometimes when you're closing it. It just feels normal when you're flicking it out. I'm not going to say it's good or bad, but bottom line is if you're after something different, you're not going to be disappointed here. So I've been talking a lot about the internals, and I think that's for good reason, because they're by far the most interesting part here. The rest of the knife kind of just leaves me a bit cold. The handle here is stonewashed titanium, so there's not really much to talk about. Blade on this one though, that one's nice. Can I see on this side? It's in CPM S110V. So, and the PHT right here stands for Peters Heat Treat. So, Peters is one of the best out there, and S110 is a crazy steal, and it's at the same level as M390. You're getting a hell of a lot of performance out of this one. I think the original run was in CPM 154, so I'm glad I got this later one here. Huge steel upgrade. The blade itself is in this kind of stubby sheep's foot type thing. I always like those from a functional standpoint. It's mostly flat over here, a bit of belly at the tip. Lets you use the entire thing, lets you get a good cut on a surface. Blade as a whole though, it's mostly well done. It's full flat grind, it has a well done sharpening choil right here. It has consistent edge all the way to the back. The only weird thing is this little cutaway that you see right here. So when I first saw it in the photos, I thought they sharpened this little bit right back here. That would have been cool, but it's not exactly the case. They just need this right here to accommodate the lock on the front. Can I see it kind of locks right there? This part goes in. So, let's see, where was I? Yeah, like I said, it's kind of weird because it's only on one side over here. When you look back here, it's missing. It would have been a lot better if they kind of mirrored it on the back too. It wouldn't really serve much of a functional purpose, but it does seem weird to only have it on one side. The other thing is if you look right here, you kind of see some shininess up here. When they sharpened it, the stones or the belt or whatever they used, that kind of touched and rubbed this part right here. If they did the same thing on this side, that would have been a non-issue. So I'm going to close it up. See that the centering on this one is basically dead center. I forgot to mention that before, but the entire knife just feels like it's very well built. Like mechanically, I have no complaints about this knife at all. But I just can't seem to fall completely in love with it. And the reason I'm kind of torn about this one is all the crazy stuff going on inside, it's juxtaposed to this design right here. And I'm not really a huge fan of it for a few reasons. First up, you can kind of see that the blade to handle ratio on this one is pretty off. You have this much blade for that much handle. So, I normally don't care about that too much, but this one just looks off. If I see that it's this far off, I want to see a reason for it. I don't see a reason here. There's no finger choil like on a Strider. There's no functional component in the back right here when it's closed. You have this much empty space back here. Nothing. So people complain about blade to handle ratio on a Strider, but at least they use all the frame. They're not wasting any space back here. I opened this thing up and there's no balance between the handle and the blade. It just doesn't look right. But you might be thinking, it's so you get a longer handle, so you get a better grip on the knife. Negative on that one too. I'm not going to pull any punches here. I hate the way this thing feels in hand. Not because it's especially uncomfortable or unusable or anything like that. There's no glaring hotspot or something along those lines, but just because it doesn't seem like you really tried at all. There's almost nothing to it, and what is there is actually detrimental to when you have it in hand and you're actually using it. So first off, I don't like neutral handles. Let me just get that out the way right now. There's going to be at least some bias here, but I can at least respect it when a neutral handle works out. The ergonomics on this one aren't unusable, but it's uninspired to say the very least. It's just plain, and usually in some grips it's just plain bad. It's chamfered on the sides right here. Let's close it up. So it's chamfered on the sides right here, but you can kind of see that chamfering kind of fades away when you get to the back. So even though it's not exactly sharp or anything like that, it's still rounded, but it still feels too blocky in hand when you go to use it. Especially when you have it like this, you use a hammer grip, you go in for a cut and you actually put some force behind it. It just feels terrible. It's very uncomfortable on your fingers back here. Another thing is, there's also nothing to lock your hand in. This is just plain smooth stonewashed titanium, and on top of that, the frame actually tapers too. As in, I'll keep it open. It's taller here than it is back here. Also, it's thicker here than it is back here. So, there's already nothing keeping you from slipping down on the frame. And that taper right there just makes things worse. There isn't like a clip on the side that you can grab onto, and I get it, that's the reason you go for an EDX, the clip's right here. But what I'm getting at is there's nothing here to really help your grip in hand. There's nothing to fill your hand. There's a little bit of jimping up here, but it feels like it doesn't really do all that much. I have my thumb right here, I'm pushing down on it, I can still move back and forth. It doesn't really keep my thumb in place. I can still easily slide it. And I'm applying pressure too. It almost feels like it's just for show. Then you look up here, and you kind of see, but it kind of did something with the frame here. It's true that this keeps you from sliding up, but it comes with its own host of problems. If you slide up against this guard, like you would if you do like a push cut or anything like that, and you will because this frame is slippery, it ends up being a hot spot, because this corner right here is right up against this joint of your finger. So that ends up being a hot spot. The other thing is, having this part right here, it just introduces a lot of dead space into the knife. I'm kind of forced to hold the knife back here. I can't get any closer to the edge. There's no forward grip. I can put my finger up here, but it feels terrible. I can pinch grip it, but the blockiness right here starts to get to me if I really start cutting things. But the thing is, this knife, with a neutral handle that's supposed to be great for everything, ends up only being comfortable in a few grips. I can do draw cuts in a saber grip. That's because push cuts make this part jam into my finger. I can turn it around and kind of use it this way and kind of pull back on it. Or I can reverse grip this sheep's foot blade. So all in all, I'm kind of at a loss on this one. There's so much greatness and innovation here, but there are also so many boring, uninspired, and just plain badly thought out design choices. There's some pretty high highs, but also some pretty low lows. It's disappointing, but at the same time, it kind of drives me crazy with how brilliant the thing is. And this knife honestly feels like it's as conflicted as I am. It has a bit of an identity crisis. Like everything on it, like the materials, the thicknesses, the lockdown pivot right here, the lock itself, and even all the wording that you see on the website, on the paperwork, anything that's describing the knife, it all implies that this is some sort of insane hard use folder. And you know what? Honestly, it is. This thing can stand some abuse. But the problem is, the design doesn't allow for that kind of hard use. It's tough as nails and overbuilt, but slippery in hand, and not all that comfortable to use. It's a 5-inch frame right here, but only a 3.25 inch long blade. And the thing is, he almost had no limitations on the frame or the blade here. Everything is internal. And other than leaving enough space over here so that the lock can engage, he could have done anything else with the handle. Even a slight finger choil up here would have really helped. But you know what? There's nothing. For all the ingenious things he did on the inside, it feels uninspired on the outside. It's almost like the creativity just kind of ran out halfway through. I've said a lot here, but in all honesty, I actually still do like this knife. I wouldn't mind hanging on to it. There's just nothing else like it, and it still amazes me how well done this insane lock is. I can't stress that enough. I probably said it too many times already. The build quality is impressive too, and that blade in S110V with a Peters heat treat, that's probably among the best. But the thing is, he wrapped a whole lot of interesting in 5 layers of boring. It's like you're at a restaurant chatting with the chef after your meal and saying, "Chef, your steak was one of the best I've had. But why did you make me eat 5 cheap microwave dinner rolls without a drink before serving me my entree?" There's a lot to love here. You need to get past quite a bit to really enjoy it. And I think I'm rambling at this point, so that's all I got for you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.